Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jezril, the last reporter of this group. But before we proceed to our discussion, let us once again read the learning outcomes. So at the end of Unit 3, students are expected to identify the stakeholders as integral environmental resource of the wider school community, discuss the sociological consideration affecting the learning environment and the wider school community in relation to the external environment and other factors, reflect on laws and regulation that apply to teachers in the context of community. Lastly, demonstrate understanding of the teacher's responsibilities to the state and the community as specified in the Code of Ethics for Professional Teachers. So once again, good morning. Today's discussion was all about globalization. I guess we already encountered this one on our other subject, but let's just go further. First, let's define globalization. So what is globalization? Globalization involves the intensification of social relations worldwide. Social relations in the form of interaction, conversation, expression of emotions is now possible. Globalization links worldwide distant localities. Globalization enables events many miles away to shape local happenings and vice versa. So we define globalization as the global process of interaction and integration between individuals, businesses, and governments. Global connections have resulted in an increase in international trade as well as the interchange of ideas, belief, and culture. Globalization is essentially a business-to-business interaction and integration process with social and cultural implication. Persecution and diplomacy, on the other hand, are an important element of history of globalization as well as modern globalization.
Globalization affects commodities, services, data, technology, and capital economic resources from an economical perspective. The economic activity such as the exchange of commodities and finances is aided by the expansion of global marketplaces. Advances in transportation such as steam locomotive, steamships, jet engine, and container ships, and developments in telecommunication infrastructure such as the telegraph, internet, and mobile phones have been major factors in globalization, resulting in increased connectedness of economic and cultural activities around the world. So that's how we define globalization. But let's connect globalization and education. So as you can see, in the middle, you'll find education as a center of this discussion. So anything that revolves around it are the things that connect globalization and education. Globalization and education. First, we have cross-border education. This refers to the educational services going to the students across national borders instead of the students going to the service overseas, as in another form of international education. This includes cross-border higher education, where institution, programs, students, or staff cross national borders. Cross-border higher education offers both opportunities and challenges for education system, their respective communities, and countries at large. So example of cross-border education is all types of higher education programs or courses of study or educational services including distance education and programs that belongs to the educational system of a foreign country or be implemented independently of any national education system. Next, we have the ubiquitous education. Ubiquitous learning can be defined as an everyday learning environment that is supported by mobile and embedded computers and wireless networks in our everyday life. It is aimed to provide learners with content and interaction anytime and anywhere. The learning process includes real-life experience augmented with virtual information and is adapted to the learner and learner's environment. So the example of ubiquitous education is the use of computers and internet to distribute online courses and distance learning. Next, we have multilingual. So in globalized, interconnected world, multilingualism is essential for effective communication, understanding of other culture, and the development of global citizens' value. In addition to being part of a global personal cultural identity and a practical tool for communication in transnational teams, multilingualism has been linked to creativity and to problem solving, both, both of critical importance in addressing complex issues, and regular use of more than one language has been shown to stave off dementia. So example of multilingual is the use of at least three languages, for example, the mother tongue, a regional or national language, and international language in education. Next, we have the change is accelerating. So education is undergoing constant changes under the impact of globalization. The effects of globalization on education bring fast development of communication technology and foreseeing changes in school system around the world. Around the world as the ideas, values, and knowledge change the role of students and teachers. Education system is closely related to technology development. Universities, schools, and colleges try to improve the indicators of quality of knowledge of their students through the use of advanced technology. So example of this is the educational technology. So it is combined use of computer hardware, software, and educational theory and practice to facilitate learning. So lastly, we have job that exists today may not be there tomorrow. So technology has has had a major impact on the workforce dating back at least as far as industrial revolution until now, when various tasks became more automated and the types of jobs available changed as a result. At the at the turn of at the turn of the last century, 41% of jobs were in around agriculture, and education, while technology adoption and its attendant short-term job loss certainly transformed those historical economies. That evolution of work didn't lead to a mass unemployment as much of transformation of the work being done. Changing times have traditionally closed doors and opened windows as the old age goes. So, for example, teachers or instructors were able to discuss using digital technology, where in fact it is their job to discuss everything in person so that their students will be able to understand quickly and be assessed right away. But because of the presence of technology, they were able to discuss or create advanced recorded classes for their learners. So next we have the advantage of globalization in education. First, global education interconnects methods of teaching from worldwide system. It This is important to encourage the international development of environmental sustainability as well as contribution toward fortifying global industries. These educational initiatives prioritize global access to school from the primary to the university levels, instigating learning experiences that prepare students for multinational leadership roles. Globalization in education may end up creating more legitimate opportunities for a few advanced countries for a new form of colonization of developing countries. Second, the development of multicultural awareness from an early age. So with global nah. So with globalization, some of the changes for knowledge, education, and learning will provide today's learners the ability to be more familiar uncomfortable with abstract concepts and uncertain situations, as education serves as foundational to global stability. These may integrate ideologies sourced from various societies in order to arrive at well-balanced conclusion regarding issues that surround the world as a whole. Globalization and education come to affect one another through mutual goals of preparing young people for successful futures during which their nations will grow increasingly connected. Lastly, we have globalization enhances the student's ability to acquire and utilize knowledge. So globalization enhances the ability of learners to assess, adapt, and apply and knowledge to think independently, to exercise appropriate judgment, and to collaborate with others to make sense of new situations. It enhances the student's ability to manipulate symbols. Highly productive employment in today's economy will require the learner to constantly manipulate symbols such as political, legal and business terms, and digital money. Globalization produces an increased quantity of scientifically and technically trained persons. The emerging economy is based on knowledge as a key factor of production, and industries demand the employees remain highly trained in science and technology. So we have also the disadvantages of globalization in education. First, we have increasing the technological gaps and digital divides between advanced countries and less developed countries. Next, governments lack either the financial financial resources or the political will to meet their citizens' educational needs. So globalization helps countries to grow, but there is always an exception. Some countries are still struggling in terms of education. We all know that education is a human right and is central to achieving many other sustainable development outcomes. Equality basic education gives, gives children and youth the knowledge and skills they need to face daily life challenges and take advantage of economic and lifelong learning opportunities. It is also a key driver for reducing poverty, fostering economic growth, achieving gender equality, and social development. This phenomenon doesn't only apply to undeveloped countries, but also developing countries as well. According to study, around 59 million children in developing countries do not have access to basic education. The quality of education is also a key concern. 250 million children are unable to read, write, or count, even after 4 years of schooling. Many young people in developing countries who have not been able to complete quality education are lacking the foundational high level skills for work and life. So the last so the last disadvantage of globalization in education is the environment of violence and fear. So first we have war and armed conflicts. So across many of the world's poorest countries, armed conflict continues to destroy not just infrastructure, but also the hopes and ambitions of a whole generation of children. Given that armed conflicts vary in duration, intensity, and localization, educational systems are affected in different ways. So we have conflicts affects education in many ways. So we have this death or displacement of teachers and students, destruction and damage to school and educational infrastructure. Schools are often explicit
targets during periods of armed conflicts. Educational facilities were attacked in at least 31 countries in Africa, Asia, like what happened during Marawi siege in the Philippines, wherein lack of infrastructure was destroyed because of the terrorist attack. We also have Europe and Latin America in 3 years leading up to 2010. Example, there were 670 attacks on schools in Afghanistan in 2008. This conflict prevented the opening of schools and increased teachers' absenteeism. It threatens children's security while traveling to school and attending class. Girls Girls may be kept from school by their parents in fear of violence against female students. Conflict increases likelihood for students' involvement in the military, like what happened during the Russo-Ukrainian War. So lastly, for violence and fear, we have pandemic. So example of pandemic is the COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic has created the largest disruption of education system in human history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion learners in more than 200 countries. Closures of schools, institutions, and other learning space have been impacted more than 94% of the world's students' population. This has brought far-reaching changes in all aspects of our lives. Social distancing and restrictive movement policies have been significantly disturb, disturb traditional educational practices. Reopening of schools after relaxation of restriction is another challenge with many new standards operating procedures but in place. The COVID-19 pandemic has provided us the opportunity to pave the way for introducing digital learning. That will be all for my report. Thank you for listening.